Good day, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. Wanted to do a review today talking about the CMMG Dissent Mk47. This is a 7.62 by 39 AR-10 mostly, but I'll get into some of the parts compatibility much later in the review. This rifle exists probably as the quintessential AR'd my AK. This is probably a mortal sin to a lot of the diehard AK guys, but really good rifle. I have a little bit over 1,000 rounds right now. I haven't been keeping the closest count. I think I'm probably close to around 1,200. So a good amount of rounds, and how I'm going to be structuring this review is I'm going to be going from what I consider the most important items and then going down to a more granular part by part, kind of the more stereotypical gun tube type of review towards the end. So we're going to go ahead and get started talking about the reliability of this rifle. So I'm going to say that this works with most types of ammo really well. The one type of ammo that I've been having just nonstop issues with no matter what is with Vimple Golden Tiger. I've been getting constant light primer strikes on that, usually at least one per mag. So one thing I was able to do, first off, right when I got this rifle, this ships with one of their CMMG zeroed single stage triggers. I hate single stage triggers. And another thing I noticed was it was a pretty light, or felt like a pretty light hammer spring on there, contrary to what some other reviewers have claimed. And I was getting a lot of light primer strikes back then, even more than one per mag. So I've since switched it for an LMT Axle Euro trigger, which has a little bit of a heavier hammer spring, and I've been able to drop down the amount of light primer strikes, but still, it does happen fairly frequently, and sometimes it is more than one per mag, as you'll see in the B-roll footage that I'm putting up. Now, the issue with Vimple Golden Tiger in particular, even though I've actually been using a lot of surplus ammo, pretty much almost exclusively been doing a ton of Varnal Silver Bear, for instance, but that Vimple Golden Tiger, it uses a particularly hard primer. A lot of the Russian surplus stuff does, but second of all, they actually seed it significantly deeper than any other type of ammo, even other Russian ammo. So that combined does make it pretty unreliable. But like I said, all the other ammo that I've shot through here has worked perfectly. Varnal 100% of the time works, and of course a bunch of the other surplus and new commercial ammo, totally fine there. Next up, I did also want to talk about the reliability with different magazines, because an obvious question, especially with something weird like this, you can see this is actually taking AKM magazines. Right now I have a Circle 10 in here, but I've tested every single type of magazine that I own in here, and they all work flawlessly. So Bakelights, those Bulgarian slab side type of newer production type of magazines, the classic AKM steel magazines, even the garbage puff gun magazines, which is always funny because that is supposed to stand for perfect unit for a gun, terrible mags, but even they cycle correctly in here. So great. Some things on the magazine well that I wanted to note as far as long-term reliability, and 1,200 rounds isn't really super long-term, but I did want to note as far as wear, because one thing you might be thinking is the good magazines you have for AKs, they have steel reinforced front and rear lugs usually, and of course your receiver here, given that it's AR style, is aluminum. But what CMMG has actually done to ensure it won't dig into the receiver as you get a lot of rounds on here is they actually have, first off, your tab here. This releases mags just like on a normal AK, albeit you can see this is really extended and makes it really easy to release mags, though bottoms are a bit sharp, but you can push it from the side, which is cool. But anyway, you can see up here, there's actually a reinforcing screw that goes through here, and that's what catches your front lug on your magazine, as you can sort of see right there. So all the major contact points that the magazine locks into are steel. So steel on steel, that is really good for the long-term wear. You won't get any steel on aluminum that you have to worry about that digging in. All perfect. Now, one more point I wanted to touch on as far as the reliability of this rifle. Keep in mind this does have an adjustable gas block. It's one of your standard AR type where there's just a screw in the front that you just click, and there's supposed to be detents. For me, I can still turn it, but the detent itself has gotten carbon locked, so I don't really have audible clicks anymore. I was able to get this really well tuned. One issue that I did run into is you do need a long hex key, which they are supposed to ship with the rifle. They forgot to ship it with mine. I didn't really care because I already have a huge amount of tools, so I actually had one that already fit on here. But yeah, you do need a long hex key, obviously, because it needs to fit into the handguard. The gas block itself is also very standard as far as what you can expect if you're used to ARs. It's just attached with set screws at the bottom there. And relating to the topic of the adjustable gas block and also suppressor usage, most of my shots have been with a suppressor, and one thing I wanted to point out is, so I don't really get too much gas to my face It is a flow-through, so not really an issue in the first place, even on a standard AR. But this rifle has a forward charging handle. It's on the left side right now, you can see. You can reverse this to the right side if you want. And kind of funny because I am so used to AKs, I've kind of had to mentally remember, like, okay, I need to reload, pull here, not here. But despite that, you might think, cool, it'll work really well with a suppressor because then there's nothing back here that's open, so you won't get almost any gas to your face. Unfortunately, that is not the case. If you look very carefully, right here on the sides of this sort of their folding stock end plate adapter, what you're seeing, that little gap right there, is actually the back of the recoil spring. Because keep in mind, this is a bufferless AR, so everything is housed in here. But unfortunately, that little gap means that gas is also going to escape back through here. So I've occasionally gotten this really weird matching sort of crescent shape of carbon just on my face as I'm shooting. Occasionally, like after I clean it and there's a bunch of oil in it. So that is annoying. I could probably seal it if you wanted to, you know, if you pick up one of these, you can probably put something in there to seal it up, but haven't really wanted to mess with it at the moment. Just keeping it fairly simple for the review. Moving back from the charging handle, I did actually want to talk about the bolt catch. So you have a standard, just very close to a mil-spec AR-15 bolt catch if you're used to that. However, two things. This is not ambidextrous, which makes it a little bit weird if you have the charging handle on the left side. And second of all, this bolt catch is really just for administrative purposes only, because the mags, of course, AK mags, do not have a way to lock this open. Now, you might be thinking that, you know, bolt hold open followers do exist for AK mags, however, they are not compatible in here. So obviously, standard AK mags don't work, but even if I do take out, for example, this magazine right here, this is a Yugoslavian, supposed to be bolt hold open magazine. The issue with these, if I go ahead and turn this around here, so as an aside, you do have a polymer dust cover, which I always do like. These tend to have a bit of a better seal, but moving back to the main point, so you can see there's your bolt hold open follower. You can feel a little bit of friction as you ride the bolt over it, but essentially on this receiver, on this rifle, the bolt hold open follower sits way too low to actually engage. And furthermore, even if you somehow got a follower that sits high enough to engage the bolt and to hold it back, your actual bolt lock, if you press the bolt catch right here, you can see, sits way back here. So you're not going to be able to get it to work properly if you use a bolt hold open follower. Next, I wanted to move to the precision of the rifle. So if you want all the details on the precision, I did a precision test just dedicated to how well this rifle can do several weeks ago, or I think over a month ago now, because I just got busy with other stuff and delayed this video. But it's a remarkably accurate rifle, I would say, especially for the caliber. 7.62 by 39 has a reputation for being inaccurate, and I think that just has to do with it being shot through a lot of AKs, which, although I like AKs, I'll get into this more later, but big reason I picked this up was to avoid a lot of the pitfalls as far as with precision on AKs, because there's a lot of potential issues you can run into if an AK isn't pretty much built perfectly from the factory that can cause it to shoot wildly poorly. So I'm not going to rehash that entire precision video, but I'll put all the scores up here. Just really, really good, even with a 30-shot group. That shot better than my Wasser 10 ever did. So very cool. So that does it for the most important details. I wanted to go now and talk about more of a very granular part by part, but I wanted to start first, understand my selection criteria. So why did I pick up this rifle in the first place? The primary driving factor behind me picking this up at all was as a replacement for my Wasser 10. So what I was mainly looking for was I wanted something that would still take AK mags, because I have a really big stockpile of them. I didn't want to pick up one of the 7.62 by 39 AR-15s, which have that, you know, they have to have that really straight curve, and then they go to the kind of the regular banana shape of a 7.62 by 39. I've always heard that that causes issues. And second of all, I heard that the really thin bolt walls on the bolt face of those AR-15 7.62 by 39s have issues with long-term durability since they're so thin they can crack. Since this is an AR-10 bolt in here, it's nice and thick, causes some issues with finding replacement barrels and bolts, as you can imagine, which is a bit of a downside. This looks like an AR-15, you might say, but surprisingly a lot of proprietary parts on here. However, overall, the main competitor I was really debating on picking up was either, like I said, this or the M+M M10, which, or M10 X Plus, I think is their newest generation. I didn't pick up that one because I saw a lot of negative reviews on their older generation models. I've heard that their newer ones are fixed, but just for me, personally, seeing that many negative reviews on the old ones, I can't trust it until I see more positive reviews on the newest stuff to really know. I don't want to be a beta tester for them. So here I am with this. And I didn't want to pick up another AK. You might be wondering, why didn't I do that? And the reason for that is just because of the potential for inaccuracy, imprecision, like I was saying earlier. So if you want to go back through my video catalog, I've done a decent amount of precision tests and also kind of discussing some major factors that can cause issues with the precision on AKs. One of the biggest ones actually is with the muzzle device. The way that the muzzle device is attached on an AK can cause issues. Having a cleaning rod can sometimes impact the harmonics. You know, you have the bottom cleaning rod retained by the front sight post. Your front sight post, depending on how that was attached, can also cause problems. The pencil profile barrel in general can cause issues because it has way more whip. So yeah, AK is just a lot of the time, their precision can really change drastically depending on the type of ammo you're putting through it. I didn't actually cover this earlier. I suppose actually I should touch on that right now. Speaking of the barrel profile, since I was saying that AKs have a pretty thin barrel, this is a medium profile barrel. Yeah, very comparable to other medium profile barrels that I've used in the past. I'm most familiar with medium profile barrels like from the HK series, and yeah, this is quite similar. It does heat up and it does get some more dispersion. Like I said, with that 30-shot group, saw quite a bit bigger group compared to the 10-shot groups I was doing. And as a result of the barrel profile and just how they built everything, this is actually a really, really well-balanced rifle. With the exception of the suppressor, can't really get around that. Those are always going to throw off the balance. But yeah, this has a really nice, just very centered balance when you're not shooting suppressed. Now, for the exact version of the Mark 47 that I picked up, this is the 16-inch or 16.1-inch barrel length with the Sniper Gray Cerakote, which I actually really like how this turned out. I was a bit concerned this would be almost black on their website. Their photos are pretty bad, and this looks really dark. I would say that this looks comparable to the photo they have on the site of the tungsten color, but I guess since everything appears to be darker on their site, I imagine the tungsten's going to be close to white. But you can see that just right there. And the Cerakote has been really well applied too. No issues with wear. The only parts where I've had some scratch off is just some back here on the back of the receiver just from folding the stock, because I actually have a bit of a collision right there, but that's fine. I actually picked this up as their pistol version, not a legal definition, keep in mind, because this is a 16-inch or slightly over 16-inch barrel. What that just means is that it doesn't come with their stock. The reason I picked this version up was because I didn't really like the look of their stock that comes on the rifle version. And I don't mean that just in the aesthetic sense. I mean that it doesn't look the most well-built. It doesn't look the most comfortable. So I just put a buffer tube adapter onto mine. Currently just using a SIG MCX stock, which is kind of funny. This is actually an IMI defense stock. I found it after the fact. Just as a little aside. It's a carbon copy, just with SIG marked on it. Anyway, I don't know if that makes it worse or better. Probably even worse. It's not the best stock, but it does the job. And of course, you can fold it, as I said a few other times before, since this is a bufferless design, which is just cool, easier to transport, and if you get the shorter barrel, you can kind of maybe make this into a backpack gun then. Moving up from the stock though, one part that I had some complaints on. So I've actually switched out quite a few of the original parts on here. So starting with the grip, safety, trigger, I already did cover the trigger, of course. I did also replace the safety selectors. So the OEM CMMG Dissent safety selectors on here are aluminum, and they kind of have, it sounds stupid, but they have kind of these sharp edges on the sides of them to, I mean, I guess they grip your hand well, and they look kind of cool if you're into that, but I wasn't really a fan, so I replaced mine with just a 45-degree throw HK selector. The original one is actually a 60-degree throw, so that is nice. One real big complaint I had is the original safety selector is ambi. So I would say it's really ambi on paper only, and that you have a lever on both sides. You have a long lever on the left, short lever on the right. Of course, you can switch that around if you want. But the right side lever is so short and so narrow, I was actually having trouble ever using it, because if you look at the takedown pin, it actually basically partially shrouds it. You can barely get your hand in there. If you want to accessorize your takedown pins, or I should say in your pivot pin, for any reason, you cannot replace these with AR-15 pins. These are their own length. And similarly, you can't swap out your upper for a different lower or whatever that are an AR-15, lower or upper, because this is all more of a 308 AR spec. Like I said, of course, just shoot 7.62 by 39. So do keep that in mind, that you're kind of limited on some of the bigger parts. Moving next, the pistol grip. I did replace this as well with another HK grip, because I love the HK parts. They are the best made in my opinion. I had a ton of complaints with the original pistol grip, which thankfully it's fairly easy to remove, though it's also actually slightly different than an AR, even though it takes AR grips. The original is just really narrow, at least for my hands. I have quite large hands, and there's really no texturing to it. The problem I have with the original, if you look at that design, and if you look at other pistol grips that do this, when they cut the texture into the grip rather than having this extruded, for example, like this granular surface that I have on the HK, it just feels slick no matter what. It gives it the appearance pretty much that it has texture to it, but it just doesn't work very well compared to having something outward sticking out. Good grippy surface here. When you are removing the pistol grip, something interesting they did, because keep in mind this is bufferless, they actually changed how your takedown pin detent attaches. I feel like they still would have had room to go to the rear like a normal AR-15, but whatever. Your detent and your spring actually goes down into the pistol grip, so it can be a little bit awkward because now you need to line up both the safety detent spring as well as the takedown pin detent spring when you're putting your pistol grip back on. Another reason I replaced the original pistol grip was the trigger guard. How it interacted with the original grip was really, really uncomfortable. I like to choke up really high onto the receiver, up like here. And the issue I was running into is on my middle finger right there. It was bumping into this. So the trigger guard is kind of winter type, expanded, enlarged, so you can shoot it nice and easy with gloves. I like that on paper, but the weird thing that they did is if you look at the back here, they cut it away so you can fit a grip with the trigger guard overhang onto here, which mine does have. The original grip does not have, but they didn't round it or anything. It's just a sharp surface, and you really, really feel that, especially with the original grip. Unfortunately, even with this grip with the overhang, it helps a little bit to mitigate that, but I still do feel it some. So I really hate that. I wish they would have just put a standard trigger guard or something on here differently, or just rounded that out more. They could have done that, of course, too. As it stands now, that is a very commonly gripped area, and it's not comfortable. One thing also on this receiver, do note where the stock actually attaches. It's going to feel a bit different as far as how you actually get your weld onto the sights. So if you're used to AR heights, you might want to drop it a little bit lower, just because you can see how high the rail sits in comparison to the stock line here. I'm still using a 226 optic, just so I can still use a magnifier, because I don't want to get a different magnifier. I have one set up with the Unity flip to center, and that way I can use it on absolutely everything that I own. But yeah, if you like lower mounts, keep that in mind. You might want to go even lower when you get this. Looking at the internals a little bit, this bolt carrier is rather interesting. So it's pretty much like a combination of the AR-15 and the AR-18, which is a weird combination to have, but has pretty much the exact same dual recoil spring guide rods and that whole system as the AR-18 does, but of course it's still an internal piston like the original AR-15 design. One thing interesting, since this isn't a long stroke piston like an AK, is the recoil impulse is remarkably different and very, very tame on here. So to quantify that a little bit, usually for me, my best splits when I'm doing drills with an AR, with a 416, whatever, usually getting about a 0.14 second split. And usually with my AK, I was usually getting about a 0.23, I think, 0.25 at the fastest. Even with a nicely tuned K&S piston and everything, the thing about the AKs with the long stroke piston is you still have that just huge reciprocating long stroke mass, and it contributes to more muzzle rise. Even when there's not much felt recoil, it's nicely tuned, it's still just a lot more going on. Compared to this, I'm actually able to get about a 0.14 split, so very, very comparable to 5.56, even though I'm shooting a much, well, I shouldn't say much bigger, but still definitely a little bit bigger caliber here. One thing interesting, by the way, going back a little bit to the internals, the gas ring is actually just one item that they just continuously spun around, which is just kind of interesting, just a little point to note. So a little bit different as far as long-term wear. That should be a little bit more durable too. Also, as far as long-term wear, here on the outside, they actually have a replaceable brass deflector. You can see this is just attached with a screw. And since this is actually a polymer piece, it doesn't ding up your brass if you're into reloading either. So I do like that. I do like replaceable brass deflectors. I don't necessarily like as much that it's attached by a screw, because if this brass deflector does take a fall, which it is, you know, if it does drop, it is most likely to hit this part because there's no forward assist on here, unfortunately. I do wish there was one. But just on this, it's very possible that it could bend the screw and screw up the threads as well. I really prefer something that's pinned on or is attached differently. But I do like this either way better than just having a forged on brass deflector. Moving forward, one more thing I did want to touch on, the barrel. So a lot of the stuff as far as long-term wear that I'm concerned about on the barrel is that this is just a 4140 nitrided steel barrel. I wish that this was 4150. 4140 is not terrible, but definitely nowhere near as durable as 4150, which a lot of the other barrels on the market are made in. You can have a debate all day long about chrome versus nitrided. Personally, I would prefer chrome, especially on a 7.62x39 shooting a bunch of surplus ammo. The potential for having corrosive ammo, even if the ammo is marked as non-corrosive. I'm sure everyone was aware of the controversy with Tela ammo not too long ago, where they had a bunch of non-corrosive ammo imported. It's actually super corrosive. So there's always the potential for that. There was other rounds that I was testing through here as well that also had that potential, which thankfully were not corrosive, but still, I wish that this, especially for the caliber, was chrome lined. If you are going to be shooting a lot of corrosive ammo, that might also be a concern of yours that you want to keep in mind, is since this is Stoner internal piston, that is way harder to clean for the corrosive salts compared to just a long stroke piston or even a short stroke piston, because then you can take that whole thing out and just scrub the entire gas tube out. Of course, not impossible to just, you know, fill this with solvent or something, which I did when I was concerned about corrosive ammo, but still, certainly nowhere near as easy. This does ship with a muzzle brake. I'm really not a fan of muzzle brakes unless I'm using it with a suppressor, because there is benefits you can get from shooting with a brake under a suppressor, but as far as just a standalone brake, I usually hate those a lot. If you're a fan of brakes though, I'm sure you'll like it. It does pretty well at reducing the muzzle rise and felt recoil. It's not terribly blasty either, so it's on the more pleasant side as far as brakes. It's not super aggressive. Otherwise, it's not too hard to switch out. This uses standard 5/8x24 threads, so yeah, I switched mine out for a Rearden just so I can use the suppressor here. Last up, as far as just the extras, what you get when you do buy this, of course, the rifle itself or the pistol, however you decide to purchase it, if you purchase it. But this also actually comes with 2 PMags in the case, comes with a soft-sided case, and of course comes with all the usual stuff like the lock that I throw away immediately every time. And I'm assuming it's supposed to come with a hex key, like I said, for the gas block, which I'm assuming mine just got lost during transit, which is fine, at least for me. So overall, I'm really liking this gun. I would highly recommend it if you're in the market for something like this. My only concerns, which I will probably do eventually a very long-term review when I get way up there in the rounds, but some things to keep in mind are that although this looks a lot like an AR, there is a ton of parts on here that are totally proprietary. So I'm concerned, for example, I can't really replace the barrel as easily as I thought I could. Obviously, if the bolt does shear, which I think it's going to be fine since it's an AR-10 bolt, but if I ever do have problems with it, I'm kind of screwed because I need to find a 7.62x39 bolt face AR-10 bolt or AR-308 bolt, and same sort of thing with the barrel, of course. But no actual issues thus far. The only thing I've been having, like I said, was the light primer strikes. That's purely an ammo issue. Everything else has been perfect, and this has been a really, really fun and really accurate shooter. So I hope this video was informative, and if you have any other questions on this, feel free to leave those in the comments below. I'll do my best to get back to you. And if nothing else, thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Take care. See you on the next one.